Hi everyone, how you doing? I'm here at St James's Park today, in the car today. With this car park being my office, I thought I'd better come and spend a bit of time down here today. Don't even need to be here today. No lives at the stadium. Was up at the training ground for Eddie Howe's press conference earlier, but I thought, look, why not come down to my office, get out of the wind. Look, you can see I am at St James's Park, definitely in the background. Sat here in my car. Yeah, a bit sad for me today, actually, feeling the need to do this, but I thought I'd just pop down here where it's nice and calm and quiet, apart from the wind outside, hence why I'm sitting in the car, and just give you guys a bit of chat about what Eddie Howe had to say this morning and sort of my reading into his words. Look, I thought today coming to the press conference, and I also had a separate one-to-one with Eddie beforehand, and his mood was the same in both, but I felt today that Eddie would kind of come out swinging a little bit, frustrated, angry, disappointed at the performance against Manchester City last weekend on the back of two previous league performances against Fulham and Bournemouth that were poor. But he didn't. He was trying to obviously keep things under wraps today, and look, at Eddie said a number of times that it's all about calmness in his job and trying to stay level. But as ever with these press conferences, I go back and I listen to it again, and I've kind of picked through some of it. And I think with Eddie, when you probably don't notice it straight away, but when you then watch it back or read it back, and you actually read what he said and you take on board what he said, that there is some fairly strong stuff and some telling stuff in there. Now, today a lot of questions were posed to him regarding Newcastle's form, inconsistency, the fact that a lot of us were kind of posing the questions and framing it that Newcastle's players, some of them, the big players, turn up in some games and not others, and that they almost at times pick and choose the games that they turn up in. And look, I think that's a fair comment when you look at recent performances. You hammer Arsenal 4-0 over two legs, both games live on Sky, both huge matches, particularly the second leg here. You win at Man United, live on TV, down there, battered Man United. At Spurs in the early kickoff on the Saturday, it was live on TV that day, against teams that are supposed to be bigger and better than you, and wipe the floor with them. But then you don't turn up at home against Bournemouth, you don't turn up at home against Fulham, you don't turn up against Man City. It felt a bit like, 3 o'clock kickoff Saturday afternoon, it felt a bit like the players were almost beaten before they started in that game, and it was a mental thing for me. It just felt like they rolled over against Manchester City, and it feels like you don't know what Newcastle side you're going to get at the moment. It's very, very Jekyll and Hyde, and that must be frustrating, annoying for you guys as fans. Without doubt, it's the same for the Newcastle manager, but he obviously has to be very, very, very clever in terms of what he says in front of the cameras, because you don't want to dig players out too much that then can affect their confidence or can make them go the opposite way. And you need to. It's a really difficult judgment call for a manager, and you could tell by his words today. I felt like he was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place as to exactly how to communicate how he's feeling and how the situation is. But just a couple of the answers that I wanted to point out, and one of them was to a question when he was asked if the players, what's their emotions been like in training this week? Have they been angry? Have they been frustrated? And he stopped for a couple of seconds, Eddie, and he said, look, I want to be honest with my answer here. And he said, anger, no. Disappointment, yes. And he said, look, the commitment is there in training, absolutely. He said, but perhaps the quality isn't there. And it was quite an admission from Eddie Howe at that stage. Now, I think part of him saying that, I think he's alluding to the fact that the numbers are small at training, and quite often they're having to draft in some of the youth kids from the academy to make up the numbers. And I felt that. I was at the training session myself on Wednesday, and when the players all came out, it's hard to recognise them first off because they all had hats and snoods, and you couldn't really see too much of their face. But I actually said to my colleague, my cameraman, I said, there's very few players out today. And then I watched it back later, and then there actually was a lot of the players. The main guys were all pretty much all there, but such were the numbers so low, it felt like a really small session, and I think that's what Eddie Howe's hinting at, that like they don't have a huge pool to train with, because they've lost further players in January in the shape of Kelly and an Almiron. They've not really added players to bulk up the squad, and it feels very much like they've got the starting 11, and then you've then got your Barnes, Wilson, who are just coming back, and then Longstaff and Miley, and then the kids really. You've got Matt Target there, but there doesn't feel like most squads with a team challenging for the top 5 have got 2 players for each position. You look at someone like Brighton, you look at their subs bench every week, and they've got 4 or 5 attacking players who can come on and change and affect the game, and Newcastle don't have that at the moment. And I think that's what he was alluding to, is the fact that there is a lack of quality and depth there, which might not be helping them in the training department, which would be a shame if that's affecting things. But at this level of football, little details like that can make a real difference. And if you're asking a small group of players to train with each other without the help of guys who are desperately trying to get in the team, then sometimes that can create a problem. You look at the Newcastle starting 11 right now. Really, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 positions that are in question, but looking ahead to the cup final in 3 weeks, you can pretty much, if everyone's fit, you can pretty much pick the starting 11, give or take maybe 1 or 2 positions. Do you start Trippier or Livramento right back, and then does he go for the back 3 again with Schär, Botman and Byrne, or do one of those miss out? But obviously if you go with the 3 of those, it means that Joe Linton doesn't play, and obviously he would want him to play. So it's pretty much just that one position at right back, and then the goalkeeper. But look, I said this on Wednesday in my video, I would be surprised if Pope is not back in before the cup final. Now, whether that's on Sunday against Forest, whether he comes back in against Liverpool, or probably the most likely for me is that he comes in and plays against Brighton in the cup next Sunday and retains his place after that for the West Ham game. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the scenario we see, but I would be surprised if Nick Pope isn't wearing the gloves come cup final day at the middle of March. So that was one thing Eddie Howe had to say today, and it kind of just took my breath a little bit, because I was like, it's very unlike him for him to say the quality maybe isn't there. And having looked at it again and listened to it a couple of times and read between the lines, I think he means the strength and depth and numbers. I don't think he means the players aren't putting it in, but there's obviously maybe a slight issue there. There's something that he's having to manage and deal with, and it's maybe not helping the general situation, which is a shame, because we were sat here just 6 weeks ago, less than that, 4 weeks ago, talking about Newcastle breaking a club record, winning 10 games in a row. Everything was brilliant. Everyone had smiles on their faces. There was real positivity coursing through the club, and since then we've had 3 defeats. One where they've not turned up against Man City, and 2 home defeats here where tiredness was blamed. That first one against Bournemouth, but I think Eddie Howe will now be looking at it and saying, hang on, we can't be tired against Bournemouth, then tired against Fulham, then tired against Man City, when they've only got a couple of injuries. They don't have European football to deal with. You can't just keep saying tiredness, and I think he knows that himself, and he'll be questioning without doubt internally as to why Newcastle are turning up in certain games and not others. And hopefully it doesn't go on too much longer. He did say that this week he's had a lot of one-to-one meetings with players to try and get to the bottom of the issue and trying to see how they're all feeling. So let's see what happens here on Sunday against Nottingham Forest, and which is going to be a huge game. Eddie mentioned it himself today. He said, look, just a number of weeks ago we were looking so strong and cohesive, and now we don't really know kind of what performance we are going to get, which Newcastle team that we're going to see, and that must be a really difficult thing for a manager to admit. And he said, look, we've shown that we can turn it on, but we need to show we can turn it on a consistent basis. And well, I think he understands there will be peaks and troughs, and there will be times where our performances dip a little bit and certain players have a bad game. It happens. I think from the outside looking in, I think it's the drop off from that Arsenal performance to the Man City one is stark. Like, it's a really, really big drop off, and that will be concerning Newcastle boss and all his team at the moment, that there is such a huge chasm really between Arsenal, either of those Arsenal performances or the Man United performance or the Spurs performance, and Bournemouth at home or Man City away, and I think that's the issue that he'll be wrestling with right now. What else did he talk about today? Well, obviously he spoke about Chris Wood. I'm not going to go sit here and talk about it in detail, but Wood 18 goals this season, Premier League goals, flying, one more than Alexander Isak. I couldn't believe, I spoke to Ed in his one-to-one beforehand, and I was chatting to him about this. I can't believe that, I can believe it, but I can't remember Isak, Wilson and Wood all being at Newcastle on the books at the one time. They were there, the three of them, for 6 months between the summer of 22 and January 2023 when Wood was sold on loan to Forest with that obligation. Eddie Howe had all three of them at his disposal, all three of them. I mean, that's incredible when you think that Newcastle have got through this season with essentially just one, and it just shows you how much things have been weakened in the attacking third in the last couple of years, that Newcastle had those three. I mean, the goals this season, Isak and Wood alone, 34 Premier League goals, and then Wilson, who's obviously been injured, but a great Premier League striker with lots of experience. To think they had all three of them, and Wood was number 3. Obviously Wood was 3 because Wilson was fit at the time, and it was a younger and more sturdier Wilson at the time, and Wood just, I think Wood played a bit because Isak was on the bench, and sometimes they played Isak wide left, and I think Isak had injuries. But amazing that Wood was the number 3 at Newcastle, and then essentially he's gone to Forest as their number 1 striker, is now like one of the, I think he's the second top or third top striker in the Premier League this season. Second top striker. Incredible the goals that he scored. And he was asked about Wood and asked about Elliot Anderson, and look, he said, he pretty much hinted that Anderson's the one that got away. Said Anderson's, he says he's going to be a top player, and he wanted him to be a top player alongside Howe himself at Newcastle. He wanted to help nurture him, but obviously they were forced to make that sale, and it feels like the way he was talking, he was one that got away. He said he still watches him every week, and he's pleased that he's doing, really happy that he's doing well, but it's a very bittersweet moment for him when he sees him doing so well, knowing that he could have been wearing the black and white of Newcastle. But look, ironically, would he have got a game at Newcastle? I think he would be in the team at the moment alongside Tonali and Bruno in there, but I still think the best 3 midfielders they've got are Bruno, Tonali and Joe Linton, and Anderson wouldn't fit into that. We see Miley struggling to get back in, Longstaff's been pushed out in recent weeks, and it felt a bit like Anderson or Miley, one of them would kind of have to go. It's a shame, but look, without doubt Anderson's getting better game time at Nottingham Forest than he would have got here, and his career is definitely pushed on as a result of that move to Forest. It's just a shame it was at Newcastle's expense, but that is Newcastle's strongest area of the pitch, isn't it, in midfield, and so difficult to break into that. So yeah, there's lots on him and Wood. Newcastle will be hoping neither of those players score here at St James's Park on Sunday, because that could be a strange old atmosphere, and they need a much better performance than the one against them last year on Boxing Day when they succumbed to a 3-1 defeat. That was a bit like that Bournemouth performance a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was poor that day. They need to try and get their heads onto how they played away from home at the City Ground earlier in the season, where they were excellent in that second half. So yeah, there was lots on those two. Anderson, the one that got away. Wood, it sounds like he was really pleased with what he did at the club, but I don't think anyone saw him going on to score the goals that he's done at this stage of his career. In his early 30s now. It felt like he was coming towards the end of his career at Newcastle, but he's managed to kick on again and reinvent himself, and you look, well done to him. With regards to the game Sunday, tough one. Is it a big game? It's a big game. Of course it is. If Newcastle win, they cut the gap to 3 points on Nottingham Forest. If Forest win, the gap goes to 9. That's almost insurmountable. That's going to be really difficult to claw that back. I look at that top end of the table. Arsenal and Liverpool will be in the Champions League. I think there's a good chance Chelsea will, and Man City should hit their straps at some point, especially now they're out of Europe. I feel that 5th position is between Newcastle and Forest, so this is your chance, Newcastle, to claw that gap back to 3. That would mean they've lost 2 in a row, and it might just start a run of poor form. I've been saying that for weeks now and it hasn't happened, but this is Newcastle's chance to put a marker down and show that they can finish in that top 5. I think if you lose at home on Sunday, it's going to be really, really difficult. I think that's a real psychological blow if you lose this one. So huge game on Sunday, but with that huge game means that all the players turn up, doesn't it? Because it's the lesser games they don't seem to be turning up in. Huge games mean a Newcastle win. So yeah, I'm going to stick my head on the block here and see Newcastle beating Forest on Sunday and setting up the match against Liverpool in midweek, which will be a completely different sort of challenge whatsoever, and a really, really difficult one to get anything from. But yeah, let's get Sunday out the way first. So that's it from me, guys. Yeah, Strange won this morning. As I say, thought Eddie might have come out sort of throwing a few punches. Then was very calm, very composed. He did say to me behind the scenes he's not like that. He says, you know, I'm not as measured behind the scenes as you would think. Let's hope the players listen ahead of the visit of Nottingham Forest on Sunday, and that you guys are back to winning ways. Alright, leave your comments below, guys. Subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you on Sunday after Forest. Cheers now.